Well, hello. Well, this has been such a inspiring day so far, and I now have the pleasure of greeting you myself. Hello, everybody. I am Angel Rich, founder and CEO of the Wealth Factory, where we design financial literacy, education, technology games, as well as founder of Black Tech Matters and author of History of the Black Dollar. What we will be discussing today and in this brief period is the socio-economic health implications of the Black community and how racism has an impact on sort of the connection between wealth and health and the overall ultimately outcome that it then has on a person's life. I always believe that whenever I discuss the subject of racism, especially in the lens of the socioeconomic standing of the community, it's important that we take a brief moment to understand the history, the present day, as well as the possibilities for the future. So in my book here, History of the Black Dollar, bear with me. I'm going to read you all a brief letter, but I think it's important for context. And it may be a little jarring for some, but very familiar to the Black community. It is a letter of Willie Lynch, 1712. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the bank of the James River in the year of our Lord, 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods of control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its highways in great numbers, you are here using a tree and the rope on occasions. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the field too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your Black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that, if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I've outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little test of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, sizes of plantations, status on plantations, and attitudes of owners. Whether the slaves live in a valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, has fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have the list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The Black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old Black versus the young Black, and the young Black male against the old Black male. You must use the dark skin versus the light skin, and the light skin versus the dark skin. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have white servants and overseers who distrust all Blacks. But it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust us only. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. I share that letter because many of you have probably never heard it. It is not an accident that the Black community has such a profound distrust amongst each other, as well as in the financial system, as well as within the socio-economic constructs that the country has been built on. In the early years of the foundation of the country, because of the uprisings and things like that, the slaves weren't actually that profitable at first. But then they created the cotton gin. And because of the cotton gin, the slave industry then exasperated. America, the Industrial Revolution, was then funded off of slaves with free cotton. It then became increasingly important to keep Black people as slaves, and in that mindset, to be able to uphold the American economy. So you see, when you discuss racism, it is directly tied to the socioeconomics of the entire American foundation. It is important that we understand that to be able to understand the present day and the future. On September 23rd, 2020, less than a week ago, NPR just released a report on the cost of racism. The U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion because of racism. Now, this has been only since the year 2000. Imagine if we were to calculate it all the way back to 1712. Okay? Now, bringing it into the sphere of this conversation, why did we lose $16 trillion? Well, $13 trillion was lost in potential business revenue because of discriminatory lending practices to African-American entrepreneurs, with an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. Then there's the $2.7 trillion in income loss because of disparities in wages suffered by African-Americans. Let's not also forget the $218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of discrimination in providing housing credit, redlining. Then there's the $90 billion and the $113 billion in lifetime income loss from the discrimination in accessing higher education. So if we were to Six Sigma these problems, it would appear to me that racism isn't just a socioeconomic problem for Black people, but it's actually a problem for the entire country. And it is important that we come together and we unite in solving this, because it's not just about making sure that the little Black kids across the country are able to grow up and achieve their dreams and have an equal society, but everybody should be able to grow up and benefit from the innovation that comes from all cultures. Garrett A. Morgan invented the traffic stop. If it wasn't for, excuse me, if it wasn't for him having the access to capital to be able to do that, what would our streets and roads even look like right now? So when we think about these things, when we think about the food deserts that impact us, that we are then sending our kids to school hungry, where 1 in 5 African Americans are currently in poverty, and 1 in 3 children are in poverty and go to school hungry. This then has an impact on the teachers and their mental health, and them having to deal with the students that are coming there hungry, and having to deal with perhaps hunger pains as opposed to their ABCs. I will boil it also down to the employment crisis that we're having right now. Affirmative action is not enough. It is a matter of having people climb the full ladder into senior positions, ownership positions, executive positions, positions of power, where they are able to use their budgets and use their dollars and be able to direct them to communities that they care about that would also need that money. It's important also to have that sort of peer landscape in the workplace so that when you're making these executive decisions with AI or maybe even just an HR manual, you have somebody that comes from a different background that is able to provide a perspective on the vernacular and the tools that you're using. Then there's housing. The beginning and sort of crux of it all, you know, the 40 acres and a mule. Where are we supposed to live? And by these practices of redlining, you see the country actually lost out on a lot of housing credits. We could have a much more diverse society and much smarter cities that were operational and truly be the superpower of the world if we simply stopped this redlining business and were more integrated in our housing, making sure that people had safer homes. Not to mention waste management and the health implications that come from homelessness and people being crowded in different facilities. Then education. There is no knowledge is power. There is no advancement without education. One of the core reasons that they didn't allow the slaves to read was to limit us from education. So at the sort of Maslow hierarchy of it all, we must be able to learn the information and have the tools. Even if you watch the Hidden Figures movie, the lady was able to, she had to go into the library and steal a book to learn how to code. That ultimately then helped put a man on the moon. So imagine all the other things that are happening as a result of our limited education. Even I, growing up in DC, the nation's capital, which is at the time was Chocolate City, I didn't even know that textbooks were supposed to be in the same year that they came out until I went to college. Our textbooks were at least 10 years old with the information that we had, and probably still to this day. So when you think about the socioeconomic implications, don't just think about one thing. Think about all of the different things that impact it. Think about all of the different community aspects. And as we move forward with this hackathon in the realm of socioeconomics, we would love your feedback and your thought process around challenge statements for small business capital, employment, housing, and education. So I'm going to take some questions from the audience really quick. The name of the book is History of the Black Dollar, and the passage was the Willie Lynch letter. And yes, that was a couple people asked about that. So yes, please continue to put in your feedback about small business capital, employment, housing, and education. And we will now move on to the next segment. Thank you.